Assalamu alaikum. Uh, Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Gloria Bashir, and on behalf of Masjid Al Taqwa and the resident Imam, Tariq El Amin, as well as the Taleem Committee, which includes myself, Dr. Uh, Lionel uh, Allen, and chaired by Dr. Aisha El Amin. I greet you with the greetings of peace. Again, Assalamu alaikum. And so let's open our Talim today with Al Fatiha. And, um, um, and I've been remiss in the past when I've not done that. So I really want to make that correction today. With Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. Praise be to Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, master of the day of judgment. Thee do we worship, in thine aid we seek. Show us the straight way, the way of those on whom thou hast bestowed thy grace, those whose portion is not wrath, and who go not astray. Ameen. That is the opening for Muslims, for those who are non-Muslim who are joining us today. And so today's topic is one that I'm really excited about. And we have two extraordinary, dynamic sisters as we continue our third installment in our Women's History Month. And our presenters today are our beloved Dr. Constance Shabazz, who I have dubbed our national treasure, as well as the highly esteemed Dr. Audrey Tanksley. So let me just share with you their very brief bios. For many of you, you know Dr. Constance Shabazz. She's a pioneer in our community, and with over 45 years of experience in the healthcare field. She has served as an internal medicine physician, healthcare consultant. Please mute yourself. Please mute yourself. Thank you. She has a really long-standing history as a healthcare rights advocate, and she has spent her entire professional career serving low-income communities in the areas of primary care, addiction treatment, HIV and AIDS, and maternal and child health. And Dr. Constance in 2020, during this pandemic, founded and became the CEO of Salam Community Wellness Center, and on the south side of Chicago. And this came about as a direct impact of the impact that COVID had on our community as Black and Brown folk, and how our communities have been so sorely underserved. And so Dr. Shabazz received her medical degree from Southern Illinois University, and she also has a master's in business administration and a master's of public health. She is just an extraordinary person, and we're really honored to have her today. Now, her co-host today, her co-presenter, pardon me, is the extraordinary Dr. Audrey Tanksley. Dr. Tanksley, let me just first tell you, she is the medical director of the Salam Community Wellness Center. And so I am just absolutely thrilled that she's agreed to be one of our presenters today. She was born and raised on the south side of Chicago in the Roseland community. And she also attended Southern Illinois University medical school. And Dr. Tanksley she returned to the Chicagoland area to complete her internal medicine residency at the University of Illinois and also at Advocate Christ Medical Center, where she also served as chief resident. Amazing. She has subsequently completed a fellowship training in medicine education research at the University of Chicago, integrative medicine at the University of Arizona, the Andrew Weil Center of Integrative Medicine. And she is certified by the American Board of Internal Medicine and is a member of the Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Medical Society. Now, Dr. Tanksley, as a researcher, really has focused a lot of her work on poverty and disease, as well as cultural competency, mentorship, and medical education. And her scholarly work has been presented at various regional and national conferences, including the American Association, of American Medical Colleges and the Society for General Internal Medicine. So Dr. Tanksley is an internist, and she, again, as I mentioned, is the medical director at Taleem Community Wellness Center. So I am thrilled to welcome them both for today's topic as we learn more about mental health and how it impacts women, in particular, women as the nurturers and care givers in our community, and how that impacts us all as a family. Okay, so I'd like to get started. So Dr. Constance Shabazz and Dr. Audrey Tanksley, take it away.
Okay, well, I'll jump in first, only because I got a little history background, and I'll let you all take it from there. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, and peace be unto you all. And this is really a hot topic, especially nowadays with COVID-19 and the impact that it's had on so many of our communities, and particularly the impact that it's had on women. Because so many women have had to shoulder the burdens of changing their lifestyles, having to large numbers leaving the workforce, having to be more responsible for the education of their children 24 hours a day, taking care of older family members, sick family members. So the pressure is on. So this is very important topic for us to be talking about at this particular time. But before we get into it, I just want to, say that the way in which women have been treated, as far as mental health is concerned, is not a new thing. I mean, the word hysteria, which we know is a term that is a mental health term. In other words, it only really applies to women. It is described as neurosis or psychotic behaviors of women. And this actually came from the root of a Greek word, hystero. And if you hear in there, for those of you all, particularly women, who know the word hysterectomy, actually the root word comes from a Greek word that means womb or abdomen. And it was thought way back in ancient times, and this was also believed not only by the Greeks, but also in Egypt. And remember last week when I talked about the history of women and roles of Muslim women in medicine, that I mentioned about how at the advent of Islam, that many of the texts that were used by the earlier physicians in the Islamic era actually came from the translations from the Greeks. And so one of the things that we noted was that the Greeks had this idea that women had mental illnesses as a result of some disorder in their womb, in their uterus, okay? And that if they, and excuse me, I don't know who's on here, maybe children who are under, but if they were not having enough sex, or they were not having enough children, that somehow the womb didn't act as if it was normal and would actually wander in the body, which supposedly produced these mental illnesses. And so so over time, women also were, there was no connection in terms of the mind and body like we are now beginning to think of. And this is not a new thing. I mean, this is a fairly new thing when you think about centuries of looking at women and their mental health as being even them being witches or bewitched or practicing what they call dark magic, and how women sometimes were burned at the stakes, murdered and tortured because they thought that there was some demon within them, and not relating it to anything was going on physiological. And so in more modern days, we have now begun to open up and understand more of the impact that women's hormones have. Any woman knows that, during your menstrual cycle, you can go through many, many, types of behaviors and feelings, and this is all natural, And so, but it's a shame that so many years have passed, so many centuries have passed before we really now are understanding that there is a reason behind the behaviors that many women go through. And what had happened, and I'll just say this last thing, is that, earlier we talked about last week how there was the first graduate of a female graduate from a medical school wasn't until the 1800s. In Islamic countries, women have been practicing for over 700 years prior to that. And many of them practice, gynecological specialties. So as the profession of medicine progressed and more men got into the care of women, imagine what happened. They were less sensitive to the actual changes that women go through. And I was just thinking about this earlier, that the reason why so many women nowadays prefer to have a female physician, it has very little to do with the skill set as it is that they want somebody who understands them, who have perhaps gone through some of the same experiences that they have behaviorally, emotionally. And so that's why it's so important now for us to educate everyone, because we don't always have a choice as women to have a female physician who understands us. And we need to educate our male counterparts that some of these behaviors and emotional feelings that we have are real, are real. So I'm just gonna, shut up and then turn it over to Dr. Audrey, and then she got plenty to say.
Well, thank you, Dr. Constance. I will say I appreciate the history. That was a really enlightening for me as well, too, especially hearing about, we hear about that term neurosis, and that's just really intriguing. So, Dr. Gloria, I really wanted to make this a conversation. So I hope that everyone is, if you have questions, that you'll put them in the chat, that we can definitely discuss about them.
Absolutely, Dr. Audrey. And so please feel free, everyone, as always, raise your virtual hand or put it in the chat so that we can have a conversation, because I've got some particulars to ask Dr. Audrey. So go ahead, Dr. Audrey.
Well, I'll just talk briefly about the effect of mental illness with chronic disease, which was, one of the questions I know that you really did want me to touch on. And I think especially for women and women of color who carry a significant amount of responsibility in families, which, not to say that our men don't as well, but very much, the woman is a nurturer and is the caregiver generally of not just the children, but also of her husband. And in addition to, in this day and age, often is also working and also, a 50-50 contributor to the household. And so, it's really important to look at that. A lot of our chronic diseases that women experience, especially Black women, are further impacted by mental health. Or further impacted by things like stress. And I'm going to put stress in that category of mental health, because so often what we're dealing with is from stressful situations and stressful environments, both at work and in our daily lives. And so when we look at the top 10 things that really affect women, Black women, we have things like heart disease, which is across the board for everyone. Heart disease is higher, is the #1 cause of death for all individuals. But when you look at, Black women compared to non-Black women, you're looking at kind of that 23-24%. Cancers are higher in Black women, at least not so much that they're higher, but later detection And so when you have later detection of a cancer, then you're going to have a higher grade. It's going to be a more difficult disease to treat or to manage. Strokes are much higher in Black women. So when you look at, and I'm sorry, I'm not sharing my screen. If you want me to, I can actually, because I can show you exactly. Yeah, I can show, as a matter of fact, I think I will share the screen just for a quick second. Just because there is a graph that I'm looking at that I think might be really interesting for others to see. Okay, so if you can see this now, this graph that I'm looking at.
Yes, we can.
Excellent, excellent. So this is actually what I'm looking at, and I think it's really important to look at the top leading causes of death for non-Blacks and Blacks. And this is the most recent that they've come out with for this particular, but trust, it will be something newer coming out soon, and COVID will be related into that. But I was looking at this column that is Black females, right? And when you go to the third line and you see that for non-Blacks and for all Blacks, accidents are the number 3 cause of death. But when you really break that down into Black females and Black males, you see that it's not, accidents are actually not killing Black women more than they're killing Black men. In fact, stroke is, right? And so looking at this area where you talk about what are the contributors of things of stroke, right? And so you're talking about things like high blood pressure, obesity, poor nutrition, stress. And so I think it's really important to see that there are differences in the way that Black women are affected by diseases compared even to our Black males. And so I want to talk a little more about that, and I hope that's a question that we can get into, because when you talk about, you know, what contributors of stress are and how they affect disease, when we are under a significant amount of stress, and that can be, you know, that can be I'm having surgery versus you know, every day I come home to an environment that is dangerous, or I am, you know, living in some form of fear, whether it be from some type of domestic situation, or even from, you know, the fact that I may live in poverty and my block may not be safe. You know, you know, there are a number of stressors, but those stressors are stressors that you get on a daily basis. Work can be a stress. You know, women are underpaid significantly at work, and so, but often overworked, and so you know, those are stressors on life. But all of these are things that will cause your what we call your adrenocortical system. So basically your a part of your brain, your hypothalamus, is going to communicate with something in your brain called the pituitary, and it tells it, hey, release hormones for the body. And if I'm under a lot of stress, it's going to release the hormone cortisol, which we all hear about, like, oh, my adrenaline, right? Those are very similar, what we call neurotransmitters, or things that are released. When that's released in the body, it causes the body to do a number of different things that we need. And as Dr. Constance was kind of talking about historically, things that we've needed historically in order to be able to survive in society and in nature. So if I see a threat coming towards me, I need to be able to run and get out of there, or I need to be able to, you know, to freeze so that it doesn't see me, right? And control that response. But when that response is happening on a consistent basis, then it can cause changes in the system that actually create more disease. So what do I mean by that, right? When your adrenaline is released, when your cortisol is released, and it's your blood pressure raises. And one of the reasons for that is because you're going to constrict your blood vessels so that you can get excuse me, to certain areas, so like to the gut, right? And you're gonna divert that blood flow to other areas that really need it, like your muscles. And so your liver is gonna start pushing out a lot of glucose because that's something that your body will use as energy so that you can run and you can make it to these places. Well, if I'm doing this on a consistent basis and I'm constantly hitting those same receptors over and over again, well, now my body may not be able to process that glucose as well as it used to process it. And so now it leaves a higher amount of that glucose or sugar floating around in my blood system. And as that does that, now it leads to things like type 2 diabetes, right? When we're consistently fluctuating those blood vessels, then it can cause those the higher blood pressure, because the heart has to pump harder in order to get that blood out to those through those constricted vessels. And then when we start talking even from a gut standpoint, right, our digestion is affected, because when we're in fight or flight mode, and we're fight or flight, excuse me, mode, and we're running, we're stressed. You don't need to digest food if you're trying to run from a bear, right? You need to run. So your body isn't sending the blood flow to the gut to give it the nutrients that it needs and the blood flow that it needs in order to break down food. And so that's leading to things like irritable bowel syndrome and leaky gut syndrome and all of these things that can contribute to obesity and to poor nutrition and digestion. So I'll stop there because I could go on and on and on and on, but I want to make sure this is interactive. So please let's answer questions and stuff. I'm gonna actually stop sharing this screen.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Dr. Audrey, for our pre-med 101 class, because that was very, very informative. And I'm sure that we've got lots of questions with regard to how we as African-American females, how we as African-American caregivers, right? How do we begin to mitigate that stress? Okay. And so any ideas or suggestions on how to mitigate this stress, because we're under it, as you said, some of us are all day bombarded with all of these stressors in our lives, though we are not fighting bears, right?
Exactly. No, the bears take on different things in 2022, right? Like COVID or right? Or as I was mentioning before, workplace or domestic or raising kids in a society. Poverty. Poverty is one of the biggest stressors, substance use is a result of some of those things. So I'm going to answer some. I'm sure Dr. Constance wants to hop in here and say some things as well too, but how do you begin to mitigate those stressors? Actually, I think that's the best question because we know they exist, we know what they do, right? But we don't often have really good conversations about how do we deal with them. So first, I think we have to recognize that our mind, body, and spirit are all connected, and that each one needs to be in some level of balance in order to be the most whole or well that you can be. And so I would say, and so how do you mitigate stress? Well, you have to address every single one of those things, right? And so from a mind standpoint, you can engage in different activities. Some people meditate. Some people do deep breathing. There are a lot of good studies that show when you do deep breathing, especially those types of techniques, you can switch your body from a sympathetic drive, which is that fight or flight, right? That I got to get out of here, I'm super stressed out, like that response, to a parasympathetic response, which is actually the relaxation phase. And as you are able to, one of the breaths that we teach at Salam Community Wellness and that we teach a lot is the 4-7-8 breath. And that particular breath has been studied and shown that it can help to trigger that parasympathetic. And when you do trigger that response, you feel relaxed. Your blood pressure decreases, your heart rate slows down, you begin to send more blood flow to the gut, so digestion improves. You're able to think more clearly and more focused. And so doing just simple techniques like that a few times a day can be very helpful. I think we need to, as a society, tap a little bit into some of the technology that we have, use it for our good as well, right? So a lot of us wear these devices like Apple Watches, and I don't work for them, so no, I don't care if you wear an Apple Watch or a Apple Watch, whatever watch it is, those type of biofeedback type of mechanisms, biofeedback kind of mechanisms, can be helpful because you can see your blood pressure, your heart rate, even go down when you begin to do those deep breaths. You can watch that response on there, and they often will, you can set it where it can alert you, to do some breathing throughout the day. And I think that's important because as we're going through our routines, a lot of times it's hard, we don't remember to be mindful or to be, to breathe. And so many of us are breathing so shallowly, right? And so if you just take a few moments a day and take some deep breaths, that can actually help stimulate that relaxation phase. As you see, I have dogs, or as you hear, I have dogs. Animals are actually really good for relaxation as well, unless you're on a Zoom call and they're fighting in the background. But animal therapy is something that people use. Music therapy is something people use. I mean, think about the days when you didn't want to clean up, or your mom did, had something to do, and they turn the music on, and you just really can get into that focus and that concentration, because all of those things are therapeutic to our system. Dr. Constance, I saw you come off of mute, so I'm gonna let you talk before I keep going.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's absolutely great. And I'm thinking the same thing, but I want to add something to it. When COVID started, we actually had some Zoom deep breathing, meditation, yoga sessions. And one of the things I noticed as we were doing it, I said, a lot of times for Muslims, if we're observing our 5 daily prayers, that's the way to step away, to unplug. And one thing I found, though, is that, we were all finding ourselves in front of a computer screen, okay, or on our phone. We were so dependent on the technology. We felt like because of the social isolation and quarantining, that we were shut off from the rest of the world. But sometimes there's some good to that, just to be able to kind of shut down. And so one of the things that I found was very effective for me in preparation for our prayer, just instead of looking at the watch or the time on your screen, it's time for prayer, rushing into prayer, doing it as a ritual, actually being more intentional about it. So what I started doing was, instead of, going immediately into the steps of the prayer, I started taking a few minutes just to really decompress, some mindfulness. Like, what am I doing? What is the purpose of this? Opening myself up for, of course, the God's words coming to us, just, and it doesn't take that much time. I mean, I remember hearing a talk show host saying about, he timed it. He said, yeah, you Muslims, you only, it takes about 5 minutes. Wow. But sometimes we act like, oh my God, we have to take such a long time. But just taking those few minutes before you actually start your prayer in mindfulness is going to lower your blood pressure. It's going to make you more focused, and actually you get more benefit out of the prayer by taking that time. And so we already have it built in. I mean, when Prophet Muhammad was telling him, what he did, he would go up into Mount Hira. He would go and break away from that daily, hustle and bustle, just to be able to think and meditate. And of course, he eventually began to get revelation from God. So, I mean, think of the things that we already have as Muslims that we use that can be a way of mitigating all that stress that we have every day. We got at least five times we're supposed to be doing, and there's nothing in the Quran that says that you can't pray more often than that. So that's what I would like to add to that, a way of decreasing our stress. Connect with God.
If I can just add, even doing dhikr, you know, which for those in our Christian brothers and sisters, which is just, you know, doing, reciting the attributes of Allah, and will help to put you into that mindfulness space. Mm-hmm. Doing walking meditation, where you are contemplating on the beauty and power of Allah, right, of God. So there are several things. So I appreciate that. Yes, very much so.
Yeah, you know, I love to walk, and there's a 3-mile trail that I do, and when I do it, I try to appreciate, even in the barrenness of winter, there's still beauty, you know, and looking at the trees and, you know, whatever is out there, and imagine, oh, it's coming again. And I think for me, it refreshes me in terms of, you know, just when you think like you're at the end of your rope, that this is the end of things, that you know that looking at that tree or that herbage lets you know there's something around the corner that's going to bring it back up to life. And that's the way that we should be feeling.
Yes, I agree with you. So I think those are excellent suggestions from both you, Dr. Constance and Dr. Tanksley. I'd like to ask a little bit about what's called the social determinants of health. And you've touched on that, but can you go into a little more detail, Dr. Tanksley, about that?
Sure. So social determinants of health is a term that, like, as you mentioned, kind of encompasses a number of different aspects, and we sometimes will say structural determinants of health as well. Those are things like access to a health facility, or to a grocery store, or to healthy food options, transportation, to be able to get from one place to another, which contributes into access. Housing is a social determinant of health. They're all of what I would say, kind of all of the things that are around health that you think about when you say, what's a healthy community? Like, what does a community need in order to be healthy? It's more than just, we need a clinic or we need a hospital, right? There are other things that contribute to that. Education, the quality of that plays a role into your social determinants of health, and into, you know, just kind of family dynamics, which is at the core, the nidus that builds upon good health. And so I think when we talk about social determinants of health, that's often where we see the disconnects in healthcare that lead to the healthcare gaps, right? That lead to the fact that, you know, people on the south or west side of Chicago will have a life expectancy of 67, 68 years old, whereas someone, you know, 5 or 6 L stops down in a more affluent, you know, Gold Coast community lives to 85 or 87. That difference is because of the resources that they have available to them, and how those resources, even from a larger level, from like a local and government, state and federal government level, are dispersed in those areas. And so, you know, they of course play a huge role in a healthy community. And I think that's one of the things that we have to kind of begin to look at as and one of the things we look at as Salam, but that we look at overall if we're trying to decrease disparities, right? So I don't know really what more you want me to talk about them, but I would say, if you really want to know, like, what's a social determinant, just think about what would a community need to be healthy. And I think that's really important when we think about our communities that do have higher rates of obesity and lower rates of longevity, right? So higher rates of mortality.
Yes, yes, yes. That's exactly what I was looking for. And what I like to say is that those social determinants of health are the things that we don't think about, right? So it's not just trying to, eat healthy or trying to maintain a, healthy weight, but it's all of what you said. It's lack of access, lack of education, right? Poverty. It's
And it's like, what does that look like? Because sometimes I struggle with, like, we talk about, we say these words, we talk about this, and it's like, what does that look like? It looks like, so there's a community on the west side, West Garfield, and I love this community dearly, but you look at them.
please mute yourself. Please mute
Yeah.
yourself.
That's the nice thing about being a host, no worries, I can mute people. You look at it and they, you would tell someone who lives there, okay, you need to eat healthy because you have, because there are high rates of obesity here and high rates of diabetes here, and it runs in your family. So you need to eat a healthy diet, fresh fruits, vegetables. So they go to the store to get those things. Well, what store do they go to? They used to have an Aldi's that was closed. They had a Save-A-Lot. It was infested with mice, so it was closed. And those were the only two grocery stores in the area. Many of the individuals there don't have cars. And if they do have cars, gas is $5.67 right now, right? And so they may not even have the gas to get outside of their community to go grocery shopping. So then you go to the corner store. And what does the corner store sell? Processed and ultra processed foods, which are foods that are going to contribute to obesity and contribute to diabetes. They are not real foods. And so, it's almost like they live in a conundrum. And it's not that we don't know these things, it's that, well, there's various layers of why these things exist. But at one level, what I usually try to advocate to people is it's because one part of it is we have to be advocates for our communities as well, right? And so we have to, push our older people and those other elected individuals to make sure that we are getting fresh fruits and we are having access to those kind of stores. And that's where community centers like, or wellness centers like Taleem come in, where we, can help address those kind of issues, and where community gardens can help address those kind of issues. And but even on that, having a more cohesive unit that can actually help people get those, because a lot of times people have community gardens in their neighborhood and they don't even know how to get the food or vegetables from them, right? And so you want to really have, so one of the things that they've done as a solution for this food insecurity that's going on over in West Garfield right now is organizations have come together and they come to the parking lot of that Save-A-Lot where people would typically grocery shop, and they actually give out food and vegetables as a distribution. And that sustains for a period of time, but that's not sustainable for an entire community and not for, for overall health.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I think that's an excellent point that you make. And I think that, how we all begin to look at the various ways that you never think about how to improve our health, right? And your physical health impacts your mental health, and vice versa. Your mental health impacts your physical health.
That's right. And your environment, right? Your built environment. Because think about it. If I tell you to go exercise, but they're shooting on the block and you don't, and there are no lights around the park, so you can't go after a certain time, but you don't get home from work until a certain time. There's layers to not.
Let me just add here, that we used to use a term a number of years ago called competing priorities, and actually that we really are talking about, okay, all right, so you have all of these social determinants, but also that you have some chronic illness that you're supposed to be addressing. But if you're homeless, okay, and you have to spend most of your day trying to find out where you're going to be living or staying at night. Okay, so what gets priority? Is it going to the doctor's office or getting in line to get into a shelter? So we have to understand, what people have to go through to become compliant. Don't just say, oh, well, they're, people who are not well educated are non-compliant. No, there are other issues that are going on that are of more importance. I remember having a patient some years ago, and I always use this as what has been my catalyst to be a healthcare advocate. And so she was not eligible for Medicaid or Medicare, and she had chronic diseases. She had, I'm sure, hypertension, diabetes, osteoarthritis. And here I'm writing a prescription for her that I know she doesn't have the money to actually go and pay for total. And so she comes back and she tells me, well, I only got half of the medications because I don't have any lights. I'm running an extension cord from my apartment to the next door neighbors, okay? And I needed to have food for my cats, my 6 cats. And you would say, oh my God, why is she so busy worried about that cat? But now we understand this is a woman who was living by herself. And those cats were probably saving her mental health, So we have to understand the big picture. And many people want to use the healthcare system, but the system is not sensitive to them. There was a study that was published last year at University of Illinois, and they looked at the hot spots in the state of Illinois, where there were highest number of uninsured and people from public aid, and they couldn't figure out why a lot of people who had some form of insurance were not going to the doctor on a regular basis, that they were instead waiting till things got out of control, going to the emergency room. Community. And another quick story, months ago, I was standing in a car behind a bus. It must have been one of the two big holidays, and snowing outside, and I couldn't figure out why this bus was still parked on the corner of 95th and Stony Island. And then when I finally eased up and I could see, there was somebody with an old school shopping cart filled to the brim, standing there on the sidewalk. Nobody is helping that person to get that cart full of food on a bus. And they had to have walked at least a block and a half to get to that Jules over there at 95th Street. So I'm asking myself, how many people are there like that? Okay, who have to take 1 or 2 buses out there in the cold, dragging heavy items, and fresh fruits and vegetables are heavy, okay? So we have to go where people are. We have to meet them where they are and address those issues in a way that makes sense, okay? And stop expecting people to do things. It's like, being, what do you say, asking somebody to fight and they got both hands tied behind their back.
Yes, I think that's your points are excellent. Dr. Constance, we are not seeing your screen. If you can make sure that your video is on, and maybe it's an issue on my end, but I just wanted to see your lovely face.
Yeah, I have my video on, but it's not allowing me. It's not showing me. So maybe it's something on your end.
Yes.
Okay. But wait a second. You all know me. So I can't even put my picture up. But anyway, yeah. Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Sometimes that means your internal camera might not be on in your computer.
Yeah, and I didn't turn it off. Well, let me try it. I'll try to see if I can set it. Okay.
Okay. Great.
Thanks for.
Great. So, I am, looking for some questions and some dialogue. I'm sure that you all have much that you'd like to ask, and please don't be shy about it, because you know what? We all are dealing with our health issues, all of us. Absolutely. Okay. And anyone who's on this call who's not, alhamdulillah for you. But we all have our own physical challenges, our own health challenges, no matter how small or how large. And this is an opportunity to really do a bit of a dive into how we can begin to mitigate, at least from as much as we can from a medical and mental health perspective, right? How to improve our health, at least getting some ideas. So I'm looking forward.
And until folks want to ask questions, I'll keep talking.
Well, just before you get started again, I just want to say I've used mental health services. Okay, been through a lot of changes. It's called life, and sometimes we feel that that if we're all prayed up, as they say, that we don't need help. And I say I'm praying for guidance to find that help out there. You know what I'm saying? So our prayer should be looking for those resources out there that can help us through these very, very difficult times. So, don't be scared. Okay.
It's so true. And that's one of the things I was just going to say. And I think Treasure has her hand up, but was that, that's one of the important reasons. And Dr. Gloria, you were mentioning this before we had kind of started as well, about having that culturally competent, I think Dr. Constance was saying that culturally competent care, right? Not so much that it even changes the skill set or any of those things, right? We all go to the same curricula in those medical schools, they teach us the same things, but there's a difference when someone has walked in that path and understands a bit more. And so, like, kind of how we were saying, you understand what someone is going through because you probably got a cousin that went through it too. So let's please take questions from
yes. Treasure's phone. I'm not sure of your name, but please come on, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Peace, everyone. This is Tahira, Gloria's daughter.
Oh my
Okay.
Yes. I just wanted to add something that hasn't been in the forefront of my mind when I'm out grocery shopping or just being mindful of what I've been eating. And one thing is just as simple as reading the labels on the things that we normally would eat. A lot of times there's false advertisement and, unclean ingredients. And I think that, just reading the labels made a difference in the food choices as far as when I do go grocery shopping. And Googling, if you don't know what it is, because sometimes we, kind of used to seeing these complex words on the ingredient list and we just kind of overlook it because we haven't been mindful of it, and the packaging is nice. And one thing is that the front is for entertainment and the back is for education. And we can just read those labels and Google the things that are in it, and that will kind of steer you in the direction of, should I be eating this or not? So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Did you say Tahira?
Tahira.
Tahira.
I don't know why my phone says Treasure.
That's right.
Excellent comment.
Yeah, your mom taught you well.
Yes.
Thank you.
What? I'm so glad you said that for this reason, because I made a comment earlier and literally what you just said was exactly what it meant. And I probably didn't even break it down. So it probably went like way over. I said, we eat too many ultra processed foods, right? And ultra processed foods are exactly what Tahira was just saying. Those long names on the back, on the package, on the label that, isn't even really a food product. That was spot on. So good job. Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a book out. I don't know. There's a book out. It's been out for a while. I don't know if it's Fast Food Nation, but something along that line. And the author says, if you see the name of something, a food product, whatever, is the same in every language, it's processed.
Right. Cheetos.
Good point.
Great point.
Yeah, yes. Thank you, Tahira. Brother Clyde's hand is up.
Well, first of all, I really I thank you guys for this presentation. It's profoundly needed. I'm going to definitely recommend this to a number of people that have not tuned in. I have a question, and and I have to try, it's a delicate question, so I may struggle a little bit in getting it out there. I know that among Black men, and when I say, of course, among Black men, I mean some Black men. In other words, the trend is greater than it should be. I'm not saying all Black men are like this, but there's a real pushback. There's almost like a cultural pushback when it comes to dealing with mental health, both in terms of getting professional help as well as having a collective acknowledgement that it is something that we need to deal with. I know a couple of groups where, brothers have started kind of circles where brothers actually come together and talk about issues that they're dealing with. Some of them quite emotional issues. Definitely, some of them are issues in terms of the social forces that we're up against. I'm wondering if any of that kind of resistance exists among Black women. I'm not in a position to know that like I am to know about Black men, so I'm just wondering.
Excellent question.
That is an excellent question. Hopefully Dr. Constance will chime in on this too, but I would say thank you, Brother Clive, because that was an excellent question, and you're right. And I think so often because mental health has been stigmatized in this country, a lot of people do not seek the help that they would benefit from. We definitely see it among Black men. We definitely see among Black women as well too. There's this culture in Black women of I'm the strong Black woman. I got to be strong for everyone and everything. And that often means not looking at your own self-care, which is very detrimental. And I think, if we really sit back and think about where that comes from, historically, it's traumatic, right? If you're not the strong, you're told that you have to be strong. You've told that you are strong so that some of the things that were done to our bodies and done to us as enslaved people, it was justified because you're strong. We die more in childbirth than other women. Our pain is less treated and undervalued compared to non-Black women, and that's even other women of color, non-Black women. And many of us have it, we again, the education, I just push through it. This is what we do to get through, is kind of the prevailing thought, as opposed to, wait, I should get some help for myself. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, a couple of years ago, I had actually started looking at doing some work around maternal deaths. Those of you know, I'm back and forth between Texas, and Texas had the highest maternal death rate. And when I looked at the reports that had come out from a task force, everything was the same for all of the women, except for things like the attendance to mental health. Okay. And that many of the women, when they did some deep dives of this, were unfortunately their complaints, like during a pregnancy, were not addressed. They felt pressure from their environment, like even their mothers or grandmothers or whoever that female figure that they looked to, saying, oh, well, look, I had these number of children, what are you complaining about, And so that forced them in their minds to kind of suck it up. But sometimes what they were doing was avoiding getting the care they needed to avoid the outcomes that they got. So we really need to look at the culture in our community, in our families to start out with, and in our communities, and open up this dialogue. It's okay. I mean, we have to really be supportive of each other. And that's really, to be honest about it, that's part of the reason why Taleem came into existence, because we weren't seeing anybody else coming in our community to save us.
Right.
So that means that there's something we need to be doing internally, to save us.
That's right. That's right. We've got another couple hands up. The Cannon family, would you unmute yourself and make your question, ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Hakima. The question I had was really about, I know there's been a focus on like the social emotional learning with in the schools, and you've seen a lot of yoga classes and or teachers incorporating that into their day, doing little brain breaks and things like that. We're seeing like deep breathing and all of these things, and teaching of mindfulness. And I just wanted to know if you could comment on, talk a little bit more about like all the benefits of those things. If one is more effective, if you can only do one, is one more effective than the other? And as a teacher myself, what are some things I can incorporate? If I could only do one thing, what will be the best thing for me to do with young children? Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good question.
These are outstanding. So that's why I love when we have dialogues. So I would say the one thing that I think is unfortunate about this country, when we get a trend, we take it and we just like, when we find something good, we take it and make it trendy. Let me put it that way. Mindfulness is a lifestyle. And if you could do one thing, I would say mindfulness, because mindfulness is all things. Mindfulness is not just like deep breathing or doing yoga or that. It's literally being aware at all times, being present in the moment, right? Because you think about people who worry a lot, always thinking about what's going to happen in the future, they're more prone to anxiety. Whereas if you're more focused on the today and how I'm feeling now, then you're more aware and you can make better decisions. So when I practice mindfulness, as Dr. Constance mentioned, like when I take my dogs for the walk in the morning, I'm doing a mindful walk, or I think Dr. Gloria might have said that. So we're doing a mindful walk. I'm walking the dogs, but I'm also, instead of being on my phone and texting, which is, this distraction of technology, at least from the phone standpoint, not the Zoom, I guess, but at least from the phone standpoint, it really, being super indulged in things like social media and things like that, those things actually increase the risk of mental illness, as we've seen in a lot of the kids. And so, going away from those devices and being, taking those dogs for a walk and actually being present on the walk, looking around at the trees and at the sky and at the, the grass as they go. When you eat, being mindful, there are a ton of studies that show mindful eating. So if you want to do one thing, do mindful eating with your kids at lunchtime, because when they're more aware of the foods that they're eating, what they're putting in their mouth, and in being mindful eating is even saying, thinking and being grateful for the hands that prepared it, or being grateful for the farmer who grew it, grateful for the sun that shined on it. It's just an appreciation. It's a space of gratitude, and it makes you more eat less, actually, so that we've seen weight loss with people who actually eat more mindfully and make better choices, as we mentioned. So I think if you could do one thing, teach them that mindfulness is a lifestyle and that you can incorporate it at every moment of your life, from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep.
I want to add something to that, that I think exposing Sister Hakima to different modalities, because like for all of us, I remember when I said, okay, I'm going to go to the gym. All right. And so I'm going to try out the treadmill, and then I'm going to try the stationary bike, and I'm going to do Zumba. And it took a while for me to really settle in on what I really liked. You know what I'm saying? And so by exposing them to different things, maybe one week you're going to do, just sitting, deep breathing, another week, some other modality. So they'll have get an opportunity to experience different things Because at the end of the day, and you know, the team at the salon, I always say this to them. I said, at the end of the day, we're not doing anything to people. In other words, we're not, you know, doing surgery or anything like that. We are educating them. We're expanding their options, because we're not going to follow them home. You know, you're not going to follow them, you know, home after school, but you want to give them the information and give them an opportunity to experience these things. And then they'll figure out, hey, you know what, this works for me. This is what works for me.
Yeah. And I think also with exposure, then they can determine what best resonates with them, because the best modality is what works for you, right? Because we all are so very different. We have another one, one more.
Creature's hand has been up for a long time. Yeah.
Creature, yes.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Alaikum salam.
So I have a question. So we've talked a lot about mindfulness and things to prevent some mental health things. How are we able to heal some mental health issues? Is it mindfulness? Are there other things that we can do to eventually come off of some of the mental health medicine that treats depression and anxiety? What types of things and what types of foods? I know we talked about non-processed foods and things like that, but are there some specific things we can do to start to heal ourselves if we're already struggling?
Good question.
I'm going to be brief. So Dr. Constance, I know she probably wants to mention something as well too. You know, I would say just going back. So having the skills. So mindfulness is it's a thematic across. It's not it's a theme, and then different skills you could were a lot of the things Dr. Constance was mentioning. There are different modalities that can go but if you want to heal, I think the first thing people have to do is to become aware that they are wounded. And a lot of people are not aware of that. But if you're in that space, then I think you can begin to address your mental health through other modalities. Now, there are times when mental health is severe, and that's usually when people are, you know, have thoughts of suicide or are actively harming themselves with things like cutting. Those things generally require some other kind of medication, because many of the therapies and the alternative complementary therapies that we use are things that take time and take insight. And if you lack insight at a moment, then you often are going to use some other kind of pharmaceutical medication to at least help get someone stabilized before you can begin working on this. You have to get them to that space. But if they're already there, there was a study that just came out like 3 months ago that showed that for mild and moderate depression, antidepressants were no better than any other therapy, right? So I am of a thought that if it's not severe, it usually doesn't have to have a pharmaceutical medication, and you can begin to, but you have to get a person to be aware so that they can be receptive to working on self-help work. And that's what I would say at this point. But I think, you know, in those cases, people generally need some form of assessment, because we don't want to just be like, oh, well, it's not that bad. You know, you never know what someone is really processing. And we all you know, depression, anxiety, all of those things are from you know, there could be situational there, but generally there can be some imbalances in the brain, in the neurotransmitters that are in the brain. And so I always think it's important to have someone evaluate it first.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I was just reading an article that came out today on the internet, and it was talking about how they are now looking at what they call prolonged grief in a different way. It used to be this thought that, well, you know, if you are grieving the loss of someone over 6 months, then, you know, it's depression. And now they're looking at it and said, wait a minute, now it's not one size fit all, you know, and so, and they have been putting more emphasis now on the effectiveness of the psychotherapy versus the antidepressant. So, I mean, this is an evolving area in mental health. I mean, and so I would just say to anyone, if you're on medications, it's one thing is like Dr. RG mentioned, if there is a severe crisis, like say somebody's suicidal, you have to enter that. And oftentimes that may include medication. But when we're talking about mild, to slightly moderate, a mental illness, there are other options. And if your mental health provider, the first thing they want to do is write you a script, find you another provider.
Yes.
All right. And then look at what the other options are.
Yes, yes. I think we had another hand up, Brother Shamsuddin. Did you still have a question?
And could I just say one quick thing for Sister Krisha as well too, and for all those natural things that you were looking for, what other things can you, like specific things, because I heard you say specific things, you can take a look too. I think Sister Tahira told us you could Google it, but look at things that naturally increase dopamine, because the increase in dopamine is what actually gives us that feel good kind of feeling. And so exercise, there's certain foods that can increase your dopamine. We mentioned
sunlight
before, right? Actually,
chocolate.
I think chocolate, absolutely, sunlight. If you're I don't advocate I've been married for 22 years, but sex increases your dopamine levels. So there are relationships, again, petting animals can increase it. It's a lot of different things, but you want to increase your dopamine.
Yes, good point. Yes. Brother Shamsuddin, did you still have a question?
Yes, I just had a comment. Thank you so much for taking it too, as I'm looking at the time. I saw a little segment on the news that about the job that would pay $127,000 a year. It requires to take care of the sick. It requires cooking, cleaning, clothes, cleaning the house, being an educator, and
you're not a mother.
That includes yes, it is. And that includes working a full-time job. We have to think about the statistics of how many women are single mothers. And a strong Black woman, that title should never have to be flaunted by a sister if the family and the community has the proper value on the woman or the mother. So she should be supported. So I just wanted to say, if you know, or if you're not thinking about, or if you have the phone number, or reach out to mothers or women or sisters who may need something and ask them what they need. If we have if we see that it's something that can be done and it's easier for us than it is someone else, then that should become our responsibility. So hug a mother today, hug a sister today, and ask her what she needs.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. So yes, we have gone a few minutes over because I also have something that I'd like to just kind of announce, and then I'm gonna come off record. And if folks want to stay on to process what I'm about to say, then we can do that. So as we really conclude our presentation today, I want to honor my beloved sister, who is not only beloved by me, but so many, and this sister has returned to Allah today. Dr. Deborah Majid was one of Allah's most humble servants and a very, very, very dear friend of mine. And she made her transition this morning. She was a devout servant who was an author, a visionary for women in Al-Islam, women in general. She was an advocate for women's rights and human rights. And she used her scholarship platform to.
It's okay, Gloria. We all feel the same way.
So she used her platform to spread Al-Islam every chance she got. And so if you can just join me in making a dua, because we've had many, 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 many losses just recently in our community. And I can't name all of the names, but I do want to acknowledge and make mention. So I'm just going to make a brief dua, if you will please join. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Oh Allah, I pray, Allah, that you grant those who have returned to you peace, rest in peace, oh Allah. I pray, Allah, for your healing mercies and grace for for the family members and the friends who are left behind, oh Allah. I pray, Allah, that you grant us the blessing of ease of grief as we are struggling with those losses that we're all dealing with today. We've lost family members, we've lost friends, we've lost spouses, and I lost my dear friend today. So I pray, Allah, for your strength, for your mercy, for your grace for us all. And I pray, Allah, that you make Sister Deborah's, that her grave is spacious. And I pray, Allah, that you grant her rest in peace. Ameen, ameen, ameen. So as I said, I'm gonna stop the recording now. And for those who may want to stay on to just kind of process this, we can. And